Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 77, featuring Jana Stern, a psychic, astrologer, and host of the Metaverse Metaphysics rooms on Twitter Spaces, and also a fellow podcast host herself. Welcome, Jana. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, David. Thanks so much for having me here. This is such a fun, exciting thing to be doing on a Saturday. I love it.
I think so. It's a good use of my Saturday afternoons. I always look forward to it. And thank you for agreeing to join. Jana and I connected at the Blockchain Futurist Conference in Toronto. It was very cool. We were kind of just talking NFTs and Web3 as everybody at the conference was, or most of us. But she also told me about her use case for NFTs and the idea that you're actually selling, psychic services through the blockchain and through NFTs, which I found pretty fascinating. And I thought, we haven't really dove into kind of spiritualism on the blockchain as a topic, although it's definitely been kind of popping up a lot in different kind of corners that I've seen, at least, whether it's like certain crystals or astrology or even numerology seems to be kind of a recurring theme in the space as well. So I thought it'd be awesome to kind of connect with you and talk about it a little bit. Maybe I'll give a little bit of background on my perspectives on what I've seen, on the broad umbrella of spirituality on the blockchain, and then I'll definitely like to turn it over to you and kind of hear a bit more about your background and how you came up with this concept. So, personally, I have a kind of Christian background, Christian upbringing, but I've always found the astrology and spirituality in general to be a really interesting kind of philosophical conversation, and really just interesting perspectives have come out of it. And I've kind of learned some interesting things and just experiences from kind of just looking at astrology and reading it. I'm a Libra. I know that much. I don't really know all my other kind of signs and things like that, but it's an interesting concept to me, I've always thought, and I've definitely seen it again kind of recurring within the blockchain space quite a bit. But mostly what I've really seen and found impactful on the blockchain is in the metaverse, actually. And I've seen people doing what they call like a metaverse church. So they had like metaverse meetups, and they would have different wearables that they would kind of be able to make it so that only people who had that wearable could actually access the church. So it was kind of a really cool kind of use case that I've seen. And the concept of like community building in the metaverse, of course, is a recurring theme. So why not in the spiritual space? And, why not for people who want to practice and kind of do that side of community building? So that's pretty much my perspective on it. But definitely, I think, Jana, you've got a lot more experience in this conversation, hosting the spaces, you said now for 80 weeks with the Metaverse Metaphysics spaces on Twitter. So congrats. That's amazing. So maybe before we dive into all the different pieces that you're working on, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and what brought you to Web3 and NFTs?
Sure. So thank you for all that. And I always say, about folks who, have bits of spirituality in their life. They're like, I was raised this, but I also believe in this. I'm like, well, we're all going to the same destination anyways. That love light space that we came from, we're all getting there. How you access it, totally up to you. Nice. So my name is Jana. I am a psychic and an astrologer, among a million other things. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I do a whole whack of different things. I'm a speaker. But I had been in the world of wellness and spirituality. I have a coaching business where I do a lot of one-on-one metaphysical healings and also readings. So it could be astrology readings, it could be tarot, it could be oracle, it could be just psychic readings, maybe a combination of all those things. So I had been doing that for about a decade. And as I was, in that world, the pandemic hit, and I went from being somebody who was very, very sort of prided myself on these in-person readings and healings, loved that interaction, loved the physicality, loved what was possible in those containers, specifically like on this couch behind me. I had a lot of clients come through my home and see me here. And when the pandemic hit, I was like, ooh, okay, well, now what? So I pivoted online more. I had already done a little bit of online, but I pivoted online more. And not long thereafter, my partner and I, my dog passed away, and then my partner and I traveled. We left Canada in September of 2021, and which was kind of a weird time to be traveling, if you might recall. Yeah. And while we were traveling, for a gazillion reasons, I started losing hope in showing up in my business the way that I did, and showing up in the world the way that I did, because the world was very different at that point. And in a moment of utter frustration of the way that things weren't working, and that money wasn't flowing the way that I wanted it to at that time, and I was really frustrated. And my partner was on the phone with his best friend, and I was like, oh, I just want to use crystals as currency. And he was like, oh, you should just make NFTs. And I was like, what's an NFT?
Nice.
So I don't want to swear, but I was like, what is an NFT? So then he started to break it down, and I was like, so I just make art and put it on this thing. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. He was like, but you need a utility. And I was like, I'm the utility.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Nice.
So
there you go.
yeah. And then Crystal Magic Punks was born. So I started in my boyfriend bought me an iPad because mine had disintegrated in the Costa Rican jungle. If anybody's ever been in the jungle, you know that there's a lot of moisture in the air, and your devices don't like that. So he bought me a new iPad, and I started drawing, and I drew 50 crystals, and each one of them come with like a channeled message about, okay, so if you've chosen this crystal, then it means this, and here is why you would have chosen it, and here's some things that you can do, now that oh, you've chosen this crystal and it means this, probably got to take these actions. So I made that collection. I put it up on the blockchain, and I'm actually in the process of turning it into an Oracle deck now, but I digress. And yeah, I started getting into Twitter Spaces and just talking, and I met a whole whack of people who are really, really, really deep in the spiritual worlds, that are meditation teachers and guides and people who are really into the esoterics and the metaphysics, same as myself. And I met all of these amazing kindred spirits, and we started opening up these beautiful dialogues. And then that's how Metaverse and Metaphysics was born. A friend of mine who I had a lot of respect for DM'd me, and she was like, girl, we need to get on a call. And I was like, okay. She's like, I don't know what you are, but we need to do spaces. And I was like, okay. And 80 weeks later, we're still Metaverse and Metaphysicsing whenever on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.
There you go.
Weeks. So yeah, that's a little bit about my entry into blockchain. I could get into
9 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to try to make it. I've seen them, and it just hasn't been lining up. My Thursday nights get a little busy, but definitely want to try to jump on there. And I was looking at the lapis lazuli piece, so we like to kind of scroll through some art as we're talking about it and looking at your collection there. And I've always liked the lapis. I think it's because I've been a fan of Egypt, right? And I heard that Egypt used to use a lot of lapis lazuli, even though apparently it came from Afghanistan. So that's an interesting kind of example of ancient trade routes and such. But yeah, I always thought that was a really cool rock. And I'm just looking at the art there, and I love that. So you made each of these pieces just hand drawn on an iPad, because they look fairly realistic. Like they definitely have good reference to the different stones for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I had images that I was drawing from. So
Right.
I was pulling images from the internet. I'm good, but I'm not that great.
Right.
I'm a lot of things. I'm an artist. You can see my art on the walls behind me, and I'm a lot of things, but I'm not everything.
Right.
And I was like, nobody's going to do it as good as nature does. So I pulled a bunch of photos of different crystals from the internet, and I was like, I could draw this. And so I did, and I just started getting real detailed with it. But I love that you chose lapis as you use your vocal gifts on this podcast. It's no accident. Nothing ever is.
Hey, why? What does lapis have to do with vocal gifts?
It's your throat chakra.
Okay. There we go. Makes sense. Let's go. It's all lining up. Exactly. Very interesting. So I wanted to before we really get into the kind of nitty gritty of the utility and the blockchain, because I'm curious about how you've kind of tied your services to these crystal NFTs, and then you also have another collection called the Higher Being, right? But looking at like the topic of being a psychic in 2023, right? Like, could you unpack that just a little bit? Like, do you think that like, how would you define it? And it seems to mean a lot of different things to different people. So I don't know.
Yeah, I got you. For me, I've always been gifted. I've always had the gift of listening. It's a clairaudience for me. That's the terminology. Some people have clairvoyance, they can see. Others have clairsentience, they can feel. Claircognizance, they have a knowing. There's a whole bunch. I actually have a course on my website called pardon me, I gotta swear, Own Your Fucking Intuition, because you gotta know how to own it. So part of what I do as a psychic is I teach a lot. I teach about the chakras. I teach about the crystals. I teach about the, the intuitive things, because there's so much to know and there's a lot of nuance. But, like I was saying earlier, I believe that all religions and all traditions are all teaching the same thing, and we just have different ways of accessing them, right? And for me, being a psychic, so I always had the gift of hearing crystals. I could hear them from when I was a very, very, very little girl. And then I sort of shoved that down because I don't know if you know this, but hearing voices, not really it's not celebrated, really.
Generally frowned upon, yeah.
Generally. And I had a lot of touch points with mental health. So it was even more frowned upon in my life. And so, as I started to get through my own mental health stuff, I dove into the realms of mysticism and esoterics as a way to pull myself out of darkness. And it started with meditation and, pulling oracle cards with a psychotherapist who called herself a spiritual psychotherapist. And portals opened. And I went to a class called Enhancing Your Psychic Intuition. And the teacher was this divine, profound woman who really just showed me there's a whole universe of things that I don't know. And there's nothing that kind of gets me going more than knowing that I don't know, because I know that I know a lot. I've always been a very intuitive person. I was the girl that was in 9th grade and all my friends would come to me for, relationship advice. And I'm like, those who can't do teach. It was just, that kind of thing. And I've always had the gift of being able to help people to see what they can't see in themselves. And going through years of therapy and then years of metaphysics and bringing those things together. And really, I often say, I started lifting the tens, those easy weights years and years and years ago in my early 20s. And now in my late 30s, I'm lifting the 500s and I'm teaching others. I'm training others. Here's how you lift. It's simple. What I do is not special. I am special, but what I do is not.
Gotcha.
You all can do it. It's just about, are you willing to let yourself sit with the discomfort of hearing sounds or having these knowingnesses in your body, or, just relating to your reality differently. And it takes, in Yiddish we say chutzpah, it takes, cojones.
One of the few Yiddish words I know.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. It gets around chutzpah. Right, people have a lot of it. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's always something that I wanted to do. I always wanted to, so a lot of what my services look like are sort of like therapy sessions where you're unpacking, but I also have the gift of mediumship, so I can hear the other side. I can check in and touch in with deceased loved ones. And that is a beautiful gift that I don't always sing from the rooftops in my sales pitch of myself. But it is part of my gift, and it certainly integrates itself in every reading, in every healing. And, I do my best to work within the light to help the messages come through from the other side. I often say that the spirit realm uses me like a 1920s switchboard, where they can see what I see, and as soon as they do, they just plug in, and I'm like, blah, 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 you need to know this thing, and then people are crying in front of me. I'm like, I'm so sorry, I just needed to tell you this. So that's kind of how it works. Yeah, it's definitely
that's fascinating. No, I think, and it's interesting because I think you, like you said, you start with that 10 pound and now you feel like you're lifting 500 pound weights, and it's experiential kind of momentum, right? That's really awesome. So thanks for sharing that backstory. That's really cool. And I think everybody, I know a few people in the spiritualist space, and some that, like to read tarot, some that are just really big into astrology, others are big into numerology. I find the whole thing just really interesting personally, philosophical. I never put too much weight into any one area, but I've always thought it was just a cool concept, and definitely, really interesting. And definitely anybody in the chat as well, I want to throw it out if you are interested in what we're talking about. If you have any questions you want to ask Jana, or anything that just pops into your mind, feel free to share it in the chat. Appreciate you for being here. Thank you for watching the live stream. So yeah, how are you kind of incorporating the actual kind of quote unquote utility is the buzzword we like to use in the space, but connecting your services to the NFTs? And so you said you started with the Crystal Magic Punks, so maybe you could explain a bit of the utility around that, or was it mostly just you buy it, you get the message in the description, and now you kind of take that and try to use that to learn something or find a new path in life?
There was also like a discount code to my services that come along with it, which is sort of like, do you need to go deeper? Do you need to like really unpack this? Slide on in, here's the discount code. And then I kind of learned over time, people really want to just get access to the thing. And that's actually how Higher Being came to be, because people were like, so one of the, like I said, I'm an astrologer, and one of my gifts is being able to really make astrology very, very palatable for people, because there's a lot to know about the entire universe, it seems.
No shortage for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you're studying it, there's a lot of language around it that can be very confusing. And really, I believe that every single person on Earth should know their birth chart and be able to track their reality to it. And so for those who don't know, the way that you would calculate your birth chart is based on your time, date, and physical location on the planet, because astrology is a math, it's a science. The psychobabble that we attach to it is not necessarily a science, it's a pseudoscience, but believe me, that shit is real. I know a lot of people who can look at your chart and know things, oh, this will be the day that you'll probably move, and here's, that you'll have children, and all these other things based on your astrology, and being able to be like, oh, what happened on that day? And you're like, that was the day that I had a car accident. And you're like, why do you know that? And the answer is because it's all in the stars. So I was going on a lot of Twitter spaces, and people were asking me to talk about astrology. And I was like, no. I mean, I do a lot, but I realized that people really wanted to get readings. And so the second collection that I created is a direct access to a discounted reading. After a decade of doing this, my services they come at a premium. And so I was like, well, let's offer them at a lower rate and see what happens. So that collection, which I think there are still a few of them available, it's a small collection.
Higher Being collection?
Yeah. They give you a reading with me. So as soon as you purchase, you slide on into my DMs via email or whatever. There's like the unlockable content says, hey, hit me up. Let me know you bought this thing, and I'll book it in with you, and we can go all the way, to the stars and back together. And so that's what I do. I also sort of flirted with the idea of, I know a lot of, and this is where my podcast comes in. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. Thank you for staying with me on this.
You're good.
Yeah. I know a lot of incredible people in the woo-woo spiritual world. And I started to interview them in my podcast 3 years ago. And I knew that there's a market. I think that if you have any kind of service-based business, that you should be creating NFTs. I fully believe that. It doesn't, now it's so easy to buy NFTs with credit cards and those types of things. There's really no reason not to. And I think that, for me as a psychic and as somebody who is a futurist and a visionary, I believe that it's really important to be putting yourself on the blockchain. You're doing yourself a disservice by not doing it. And so I flirted with the idea of even, putting a service out to other service providers to be like, do you want to build NFTs, but you don't know how?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think those of us with this knowledge should probably be doing that, but it just comes down to bandwidth, right? It's like we all want to help everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bandwidth and cost, maybe you don't want to be doing it for free. I've been doing it for free for a couple years. I think a lot of us in the space have, when it comes to new people kind of showing up in our spaces, or we do spots on Clubhouse as well. I'm still hanging out on Clubhouse there every once in a while. So we get people who just want to learn, and we do give that away for free. But to your point, it's a valuable service. So I love that you're talking about, it seems like a missed opportunity, basically, if you are selling services to not incorporate some NFTs. But at the same time, I think to your other point, seems like a little bit of a lift to a lot of people, right? And so how do you see that growing? Like, do you think, obviously we're in a bit of a downtime for crypto in general, NFTs, some people are still finding success selling them. How do you feel about kind of the way things have evolved so far? And do you think that adoption, especially for those like us and people who have services to sell, do you think that adoption is heading in the right direction? Or how do you feel about kind of the way things are evolving in the NFT space, especially for entrepreneurs?
Yeah. I think that, NFTs my perspective is interesting, because I'm quite involved in a lot of the NFT community conversations on lots of different subjects having nothing to do with spirituality. I just like to throw my spiritual 2 cents in everywhere on all these random stages because I find it fun. I think it's entertaining for me. But I think it's where we are from a financial standpoint. Is pretty predictable. We saw this bear coming, or at least I did. I don't know. It was pretty clear that we were on our way someplace. I do think that mass adoption will come. I don't think it's going to look like everybody sitting in Twitter spaces shilling art to each other and living in some metaverse world all together in harmony right away. I do think that there will be a metaverse reality, and more of them are coming. Like, that people are just building these metaverses left, right, and center. And, any gamer knows we're already in a metaverse anyway, right?
A lot of people spending time in that digital space already, for sure.
You could say that, yes. If you're watching, thanks for being in our little metaverse right now.
That's right.
And so, I think that will come because we're already clearly going there. I do also think that specifically in the NFT crypto, and I want to say like crypto Twitter space, I think there's been a ton of de-evolution and devolvement in quality of what's being offered. I think everybody is just so dissatisfied with where we are, and there's so much FUD. Like, the FUD is actually, it's so noisy. But what's really interesting is when you shift just like a little bit over to the left, or maybe the right, I'm not choosing sides, and those birds are the wings of the same bird, so I'm not being political. I think when you shift a little bit into spaces where people are building products or building businesses or really focused on the spiritual, they're like, well, we got things to build. Like, the world needs these evolutions. We are in a time of what I pray will be a massive wealth redistribution, and I think that blockchain will make that possible. We're in a time of collective consciousness evolving. We are in a time of a massive paradigm shift. As we're sharing this right now live, 7 planets are retrograde. So, like, I know that everyone's going to roll their eyes about this and be like, retrograde, but the planets affect us. And when 7 of them, like, we don't have that many planets up there, when 7 of them are retrograding, it's a time of reflection. And so this bear market lines up with all those that reflection, and that's what we're seeing. We see it in crypto Twitter. We see it in the market. Everyone's like, do I want to spend money on this? Do I want to invest in things? Is this a good idea? What are you providing? Like, what do I value? What's valuable for me? What's not valuable for me? Like, we're in this time where things are really, really shifting. And until we sort of like land in it and get comfortable in it, mass adoption isn't possible. And like I said, it's not going to be mass adoption of everybody into the Twitter sphere, listening to some influencer talk shit about their newest pre-rug,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
not gonna be that.
No, not a fan of the rugs and the influencers that are just about quote unquote alpha, but it's all just like really bad investment advice, frankly. That's what I'm seeing from a lot of it. I like the art, I like the culture. We like to say here we're all about kind of focusing on the intersection of arts, culture, and technology, and so that's what really hooked me in about Web3. That's what's hooked me in about the metaverse and NFTs and what's possible there. Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of really important points there, looking at kind of the way that the conversation, in some senses, I think the quality of the conversations, while they're smaller in scope, have actually increased. Like, they've become better quality, like what we're having here today. We're talking about services and, people who should be able to use NFTs to sell their services, and, meeting up in the metaverse to, have kind of a collective of like-minded, spiritually minded people. I think that's really fascinating as well, right? Looking at the art that's on your NFTs, I was curious because when you were talking about kind of quality changes and the way that the space is changing, AI has been like a huge influence and a huge part of that, right? And I believe you use some AI in this. I don't want to make assumptions.
You're not making a
okay.
wrong assumption. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just curious how you feel about AI, and obviously it's a very helpful tool, especially like, if you're making NFTs for a wider utility and you're not necessarily doing it just for the art. I think that AI is even more advantageous because it helps you kind of get that art piece done with like not too heavy of a requirement, and then be able to kind of attach other functionality to it. But what do you feel? How do you feel about AI?
I feel very similarly. And I think it's an excellent tool. And I think anybody who fears it is going to end up being really, really differently able to be manipulated. A friend of mine once told us that, my partner and I, that if you don't learn how to control the computers will control you. And it's not untrue. We are already being very much manipulated by the algorithms, by all kinds, right? Exactly. And we've only just begun. And so I think AI is a very important tool. And I think that, so I used it in that collection because I thought it was the very beginning of when all those tools were coming out. And I was like, let me just see what it is. I was using, I think, Dreamweaver or something like that. And I just was like, whatever, like, let's see and then I brought it into Procreate and futzed around with it a little bit and edited a little. And then I wrote, there's like words that are hidden in there if you zoom and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So, I did a little bit of both. I was like, I fudged and I also didn't fudge and a little whatever and whatever.
I mean, there's no wrong way to go about, creating your own art, right?
Exactly. The other thing that I think about AI, and this is like an interesting piece, and it's going to get a little bit like out there for a sec. People get very, very concerned about AI. I'm going to be tracked. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be, everything is going to be all recorded. In this like weird way and all of these things. And, from a metaphysics standpoint, we have something called the Akashic records, which, if you are Jewish, and we're coming up on Yom Kippur, where we ask to be written in the book of life. And the book of life, which you've heard in the zeitgeist before, is the Akashic records. It is our soul's blueprint. It's the same thing that when people have near-death experiences, they see their whole life flash before their eyes. It's your glance at your book, at your Akashic records. Everything is already up there. And we here believe that we are in our bodies, that we have a freedom, right? But the reality is that we're trapped in these vessels. And this idea of living forever, on the blockchain as an AI technology, our spirits that we incarnate as, it's the same thing. So this fear of like, I'm going to be trapped in my computer, like, you are trapped in your body. Your spirit is trapped there. It cannot go anyplace else. It tries every night that you sleep to leave. And then lo and behold, you wake up and you owe money to the government and to your rent, and right. And so you can't go anywhere. You can't escape. And the same will be true. And so it's really important, I think, as we move forward, to give the respect to AI and where human consciousness is evolving too. We are evolving in that direction, like it or not. So learn to use it and work with it, and recognize that the most important thing going forward is differentiating what is human and what is not. So like the more time you spend in nature, the more time that you interact with real live people and get real live hugs. This is why IRL events are so good, right? Like we met IRL at an IRL event.
It changes everything. Yeah.
Totally, because you need to have the human interaction to be able to differentiate what the AI is and what the humanity is. And when we do that, then we can push humanity into the AI versus AI pushing humanity into the darkness, right? Think about the Matrix.
Wow. Yeah,
we don't want to have to scorch the skies, guys. We really don't.
Are you sharing some of Elon's concerns, or are you saying, manifest better,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying we control and create our realities as creator beings, right? As divine humans with the gift of creation, we are constantly, think about the power of now. We're constantly creating our reality through thoughts, through actions, through habits, through routines, through beliefs. And so if we limit ourselves to the bots are coming, we're all screwed, and the government's gonna this, and we're all gonna whatever, and we're doomed, guess what?
That's what happens.
Yeah.
So we gotta think on the bright side, right? Be optimistic and think about how the tool is actually helping us advance and push things forward. So you touched on some really interesting philosophical pieces there that I want to kind of unpack. First of all, I like to say, and we like to say on the show, when looking at Web3, looking at the ethos, right? It's about kind of replacing scarcity with abundance, and replacing competition with collaboration, So those two pieces I think are huge, and I think speak to kind of what you're talking about when you look at people with the scarcity mindset are going to say, oh, AI is taking our jobs, oh, AI is taking this, taking that, making it so hard. But at the exact same time, AI is also increasing your ability to create and actually making things easier for you as an individual to go out there and collaborate with other people, create abundance for yourself, create new opportunities for yourself. So yeah, that's a really great point that you brought up. And I think we are at this kind of precipice where it seems we're like, what's going to happen? What's humanity deciding? Like, I don't know, TBD, Shout out Wilted Raven. He was asking in the chat what the subject of the conversation is. We're definitely just very wide-ranging conversation of spirituality on the blockchain. We got Jana Stern here, who's got some amazing NFTs that are connected to utility, where she's selling at a service, or if you buy an NFT, certain ones, you can actually get a full reading of astrology. So really cool. We're just kind of talking about Web3, talking about the evolution of technology and how it's kind of intersecting with spirituality, really. So thank you. That's been really cool. And thank you to all of our listeners. Appreciate you for joining us. The other piece I really want to touch on that I thought was really interesting connection there is the humanity and immutability, right? So I feel like the big promise of blockchain and of NFTs is the immutability of the pieces that you're putting on the blockchain, right? And for those who don't know, immutability meaning that it's there forever. It cannot be taken away. The record will be there on the blockchain for as long as the internet survives, as long as the Ethereum network in this case survives, And I think that's such a huge kind of element of the timestamp kind of side of it. The what's the word I'm looking for? Provenance, right? Provenance of your NFTs that's connected to it. So like this was a time and place you were offering this service, and now the art that you connected to that, the people that purchased it, all of that is on the record forevermore, right? So maybe could you speak to that? Like how important is that immutability piece of it to you? And yeah.
It's infinitely important. This is astrology 101. This is, again, when we look at our natal charts, it's time, place, location where you were born. So all of these things will play a role. We will be able to go back in human history. We'll be able to look back at who lived and what did life look like. When we think about human history, we go back to somebody like Marcus Aurelius, right? The only way that we knew that he existed was because he wrote his diary down, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're going to be able to put our stories and our lives, our services, our soul, our art, right, on the blockchain, and to be able to say, this is when I was, this is when I arrived in the infinite, in this new way that didn't exist before this time in history, there's almost nothing that will exist like this again. We are at this really pivotal time in human history, like massive, massive time. And many of us grew up kind of knowing, like having this knowingness, like something is coming, something is not working, and we're gonna have to do something different. And right now we're seeing that happening in real time. And like, I really want to drive this point home. If we do not actively make it part of Web3 ethos, and like this is about the mass adoption, that we are human first, and I want to say humane first.
I like that.
There's no point in doing it, because we do need wealth redistribution. There are a lot of people who lived in the old world before blockchain who suffer deeply in this lifetime for no good reason. And there are people who have had far too many dollars in their pockets or bank accounts or zeros or whatever, and far too many privileges. And those things need to equal out. They need to level. We need to have an equilibrium. We need to have, like, I don't want to say universal basic income, because I don't know how I feel about all of that. We'll maybe get back to that in a minute.
Political, yeah.
It sure does. But I think that there needs to be, I believe that you come into this world as a human being already enough, having enough. And we, in a capitalist society, are convinced that our food should cost money. Food is free. It grows all over the goddamn planet, everywhere. Food is everywhere. It is totally free. We pay shit tons of money for it. Shelter required, but you know what? You have to work for your food. You got to till the land. You got to work. You got to plant. You got to wait time a little bit, but it's free.
Right.
Same with houses. Same with shelter. You have to work. Even a cave, you got to sweep it out. Do this. Do that. There is work that is required, but it's free. But we pay lots and lots of money to live on this planet. We have debt out our noses and out every orifice. It makes no sense. And so as we shift into what the next thing is, we know that we're in late post-capitalism, all these buzzwords, like, cool, well, what comes next? To me, it's that equality. And that equality is only possible if we see each other as human, not as demigods and people that we should worship with all these billions of dollars and celebrities and this, and not as shitty, nothing humans that we walk over in the street because they're homeless. It's everybody on that same playing field. And this, to me, is what blockchain is going to be. This is why I'm in Web3, because I believe that this is the future. I am not entirely convinced that I will see all of it come to fruition in maybe the next 10 years, but I hope, God willing, in my lifetime, I'll see some of it.
There you go. I love that. And I got a little bit of goosebumps when you're talking about, growing up and feeling like we're on the precipice of something. It's definitely that's definitely been a scenario. I think us who are maybe in the millennial and even Gen Xer space, being able to kind of see that evolution from like the early 80s all the way through the 90s and 2000s up till now, it's been quite the evolution for sure. It's been quite the trip, most definitely. I love that humane first though. Like, are we failing at that so far? Or would you agree? Like in the Web3 space, do you think we're lifting up humans in a good way? Do you think we're doing a lot of the good things the right way?
No, I think we're doing it in a Web2 way. I think we're doing it in a post-capitalist society way. I think we're not where we want to be. But I do think that there are, like you said, there are a lot of really decent people. I'll say this, since SBF and all of that nonsense, cancel culture in Web3, I've been hella for it. Please cancel all of them. Cancel all of them, because there are agents that are in our Web3 space that were put there by outsiders with too much money that want to pump their own bags. And I want them all canceled. I want them out because, and you know what? There are people in the space. I want to say, like, shout outs to Profits Over Wages, Shanice Best. Shout out to her. She does a Web3 exposed space. She's been at that for a real long time. And she does it in this like beautiful, integral way. If you guys aren't listening to her, I don't really know what you're doing.
Check that out. Definitely send the link. I'm not too familiar.
For sure. She's awesome. And there are lots of other spaces like that that are really, really focused on like, your influencers are being influenced by somebody else to pump bags so that that those people on the top win. And this system does not survive in this. There is no, this circle is everybody being equal. This is a different shape. And as somebody who studies metaphysics, circles, squares, and shape and triangles, that's all metaphysics is. It's all our 3D reality is. We need to be focusing on that circle. We need to be focusing on everybody bringing something to the table and letting that be enough. And it does need to be a lot more humane. And I think that, yes, it's like anything else. If you want to go into all those Twitter spaces and Clubhouse rooms and whatever else, all those other whatever, where people are talking about the alpha and whatever, you're going to get a lot of bullshit grifters. But those spaces are dwindling. There's fewer and fewer and fewer. And there's more and more and more people who are connecting in real ways, having beautiful conversations about real ways that humanity needs to change. So I think we're seeing a very slow progression. But I think there's progress is being made, but 7 planets are retrograde, so we're just not feeling
those damn planets, making things difficult. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I think that to your point about, the grifters, or even just the whole like rugging and alpha and going to the moon, that whole conversation has dwindled a little bit. I mean, they still get way too many people in their spaces for my liking, but it is what it is. But I've also seen a lot of those influencers that came up on all of that hype, and I mean, probably guilty of some rug pulling, or at least being paid by some rug pullers, also shifting to art, right? And now being like, oh, well, all of the PFPs have gone to shit and all these people are gone, but the art is still here. Now I'm all about the art. And it's kind of like, okay, I get it. Like, good for you. I'm glad you've come around and you're highlighting the artists now. But clearly, you made your way in the PFP and the degen and the kind of flipping and hyping up projects and then selling them before the floor gets pulled out from under them and all that fun stuff,
I think we have to forgive those people. Yeah. Well, I think anytime a person pivots in their consciousness, we have to learn lessons often the hard way. And most people make human errors and do things that are perhaps unkind out of fear or lack or desperation. We don't know why the ruggers rugged, right? We don't know. And
well, we know they just wanted the bag.
Sure, but what's driving their need for that bag, right? What inside themselves, what's their trauma that says you need to have more? And yes, exploit other people because you'll never have enough. You're not enough. Like I say this even about literal murderers. Those people suffer. They're suffering in their own lives. And I'm not condoning murder, right, but I do condone forgiveness. And that is really where humans are human, because we live in a very traumatized reality, and each of us is traumatized in it, and how we show up in it. Some of us are victims and some of us are victors. Some of us are the attackers and some of us are the attackees. And in Web3, which is really, as we know, Web 2.5. We are not in Web 3 yet.
There. I'm pushing. Right? We're pushing for it. Some of us are destined. We got our eye on the prize. We're working.
I'm a warrior too, baby. Let's go.
Let's go.
But what we've seen in Web 2.5 is a lot of those people who are still really clinging to the old system, and they're like, this is my opportunity. I better get it all now, because there is still in them that knowingness that something is changing. The times are changing. And this time in human history has been prophesized for millennia. So we can't not take that seriously, right? And it's not going to show up in everybody. Not everybody is going to live to see it come to fruition, right? We just know that. Yeah, people die all the time. And I think that, that human evolution, we think that, it would be a flip of a switch, but humans are always humans. We like stories, which is why we love gossip and drama. We are a species of stories. It's how we know all about ancient Egypt and all about all these other cultures and societies that came before us. I think we're misinformed about a lot of them. And I think that the system lies to us so that we play small. But yeah, I think that those evolutions are happening just really slowly. And we are now very impatient thanks to the internet and AI technology.
Yeah, that's for sure. So when I think about that shift from the triangle to the circle, as you were kind of putting it, I thought that was a great philosophical kind of analogy. And maybe we can bring it back to the metaverse metaphysics and kind of that conversation of what you're like, is there a goal there? Like, how do you feel? Because what you're describing sounds awesome. And I think that it's definitely in line with what I've heard from others in the NFT and Web3 space. And, shout out to NFTP and Sheila Darcy we've had on the show, who are both very much.
Sheila.
Yeah, I love them. And they're both very much about healing, about, bringing that kind of intentionality onto the blockchain and into the space for culture, for wellness, But how do you feel we're doing? And is this part of, your metaverse metaphysics conversation? Is this like something you're kind of just intentionally trying to bring to fruition? Because it does seem like you're saying we're stuck in 2.5. We still see all of the kind of data vampires, as I like to call them, continuing their kind of, use of our data, with most people not even realizing just how valuable that is and how much they're taking from us. So all of this continues unabated. And now we see AI kind of, who knows what AI is going to be 6 months from now, let alone 6 years from now, right? So how do you feel we're manifesting the better part of what you just described, like the good metaphysics,
Yeah. I think so. Firstly, the aim of metaverse and metaphysics as a space is for people to be able to come and have a safe space to talk about what's going on in the here and now. We talk a lot about the astrological transits as they're happening, and we talk a lot about what's real. It's kind of my co-host. Shout out to Davida Alien Energy 111 and Jody Suzanne, who have been with me for 80 weeks, and our friend the Ascendant, the Ascendant 3, who stepped down, but we really, really love them a lot. Yes. So the goal of that really is just to be safe space for people to keep processing as we move through the world of humanity as we evolve. I think we need a place to talk, and we say every week that we talk about everything under the sun and beyond, and we do. Nice. We talk about a lot of theories that are out there. We talk a lot about just some of the emotions that are coming up. We often have people who are very gifted in their own gifts, and have them sort of share little bits and pieces. Davida does an amazing POAP. When you collect 10 of them, you get a free reading from her, which is awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just for attending the show. That's awesome.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then she does a reading for the collective, for the space every single week. So she'll pull a bunch of cards, or the cards fall out every week, and she'll break them down and be like, I see this, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's really, really interesting. It's fun. So that's kind of like the purpose of that. But I think where we're doing it well right now is, like, funnily enough, the Twitter spaces. I think we're really opening up parts of ourselves. I think often back to the parts of me that used to go on MSN and AOL and sit in chat rooms when I was a teenager, right? I know, good. What 80s kid doesn't love a good throwback? Yeah. So, I think often about that, and I think about how much those conversations at that stage of my life felt like they were keeping me together. They were keeping me sane in a world that was making less and less sense. And I definitely feel that there have been lifelong connections that I have made in this space. Even with some people that have sort of fallen out of Web3, I still very much keep in touch with them on different platforms and in different ways, because I think that we are coming together and having meaningful conversations. And for a lot of people, I know it to be true that they're not able to have these conversations with necessarily their IRL friends, their normie friends. They many times can't have those conversations with their family members. And so, having all of these weirdos who are like, art, Web3, go to the moon, when this, FUD that, you're like, you feel like you're part of a cult, and in a great way, because the truth is humanity creates culture And we need cults. We need communities. We need to agree upon things and collectively, like that is our species throughout time. And like, it's how we have survived. And I think that where we're doing it right is that we are coming together and having conversations. We are, and some of these conversations are really evolutionary. Like there are times where people have said, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but people have said very, very inappropriate things. And the community rallies to be like, we don't stand for that. Or some schmucks, I do stand for that. And it's like, cool, well, then you're canceled too. Like,
yeah, get out of here.
right, exactly.
You guys can go hang out over there, right?
Bingo, go to your own stupid island. We hope the bots get you. Like, please feel free not to use our technology. Like, do you know what I mean? So, although not that, like love and light, I hope that they do all evolve. We all will arrive in physical or not. We will arrive in 5D consciousness in an evolution that is very different than we are now. But I digress. I think yeah, where we're doing it right is in the mind expanding conversations. And anybody who's in Web3 knows time moves a lot faster in our space, and that's because we are transmuting far more than our normie friends are. You know, you get up and you walk every day. You know, you're just going through the motions. We're not going through the motions in our space, man. We're doing everything.
Not quite the usual motions. No, we're moving at a different speed, quite different. It's funny. I hear people, I've been trying not to use the normie word as much because I've had a couple people being like, you know, let's try to be more welcoming in this. And I'm all for that. But there's no doubt that like those of us who are kind of immersed in this Web3 space are being pushed at some new speed that is yet to be realized by others, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Looking at the metaverse, are you active in the metaverse yet? Are you doing much, like, as far as I know, we talked off the top, kind of, you know, the idea of community building in the metaverse is very, you know, it's pretty much its core reason for being, and definitely makes sense looking at the spiritual side of things, and people who are, you know, like-minded spiritually might want to use the metaverse to create congregations and push things forward. Are you active in that kind of 3D digital space yet?
Yeah, I am. I've been really, really fortunate to connect with a number of different people who are building really cool metaverses. Shout out to my friends at Weom, W-E-O-M. They're building an amazing app that is really focused on meditation and having that be a part of their ecosphere. Also, in May of this year, I was working with my friends over at Peace Inside Live. Shout out Shira Lazar and Jordana Reem. They have been doing a lot of really cool things. We launched a mental health project with 40 artists in the space and a bunch of different really huge partners, including Tide Magazine and Deepak Chopra's Save a Love, House of Firsts, and our friends over at Intentional XYZ. We and Polly Doge, we launched this massive campaign to raise money for, it was called the JOMO effect, the joy of missing out effect.
Nice. And I saw that somewhere. Someone on like LinkedIn had that as their banner or something. JOMO.
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah, I love the synchronicity. So yeah, when I did that, you know, we did a space in, oh goodness, Jana. The big one. What's the big metaverse?
Decentraland, maybe? Or
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, why is it not in my mouth? It's on the tip of my tongue. Yeah. So we did a Decentraland space, and we had all the art up, you know, on display there, and everybody came with their super cool wearables, and we had this like move that you could do, this like yoga meditation move that was like the JOMO move, and yeah, it was really, really, really cool. And you know, so I've had quite a few experiences, and there have been a lot of people who've come my way and said, hey, you know, you would be a good fit for this metaverse or that metaverse. You know, and I think that they're super fascinating. I do lead and guide and teach meditation. It just hasn't fully aligned because who has the time to be everywhere all at once?
That's it. It's hard.
I do think that the metaverse is, I've never been a gamer. I have 4 brothers, and there are only 4 game controllers in a Nintendo. So guess who didn't get the controller?
Not fair.
It's okay. I was beautiful. So, but yeah, it was, so I was never a gamer, but I do see that the metaverse offers something different. And I think that once Apple releases their AR goggles, and there is an opportunity for real evolution. I also want to say about AR, huge shout out to my friends at the OD Labs. They're doing such cool shit right now with AR and like the technologies and the art, and it's just super cool. They're based out of Toronto, super cool
Yeah,
dude.
it's funny you mentioned that, another synchronicity here, because I had Galen from NFTO on the show last week, and I was talking about AR, and I saw that he had a picture with OD Labs on it, and I haven't been hanging out in enough of their spaces, so I call them Odd Labs. And then the next day I see like, we are not Odd Labs. I'm like, I wonder if they listen to my podcast. They're like responding directly to the way that I pronounce that, but I will never make that mistake again for sure. But yeah, OD Labs does look very, very interesting to me, because I really love the kind of guerrilla marketing kind of culture side of it, and I love that they definitely have a bit of a kind of hip hop and street vibe to it. So yeah, I'm definitely following them a bit. It looks really cool. Yeah,
they have a store here in Toronto.
Oh right, like a sneaker store or something.
Yeah, it's like they sell like Supreme, but it's and Nike, but it's consignment, high end consignment. Very cool streetwear. I met Mika and Gigi at Bitcoin Pizza Day, and they were like, "Oh, you got Tetra," and I was like, "Who's this Tetra?" And as soon as I met him, I was like, "Oh yeah, you're a magician, you are a genius, you are an alchemist, and you're really awesome and talented." So, I don't know how much time eventually I will spend in the metaverse. I think I really love IRL, and frankly, my dream life is to be lost somewhere in the jungle. So,
Nice.
The metaverse will only be part of my life.
I'm
not
too much
fully.
of a city slicker for that. As much as I would love the adventure, like 3 days tops, I'd be like, "Hey, I need to get back to civilization."
No, I'm like, let me take my shoes off and listen to the sound of birds and receive the messages of the universe. I love the city, but I also really, really love the woods and the jungle.
Yeah, I do love nature for sure. Yeah, and lake country, Ontario, Manitoba kids, we're all about the lake country, right? So, yeah, I'm a fan for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll make it there into the metaverse. I think it's a cool thing, and I mean, we named our space Metaverse and Metaphysics because I think everything really is meta, except for the company, which is not meta.
Definitely, yeah. They're the Web 2. They're the harbingers trying to hold on to Web 2 and keep us all stuck in there, trying to break free, get on the blockchain. I was looking at
biting my tongue.
Right. Yeah, no problem. We don't need to get we don't want to digress. Yes. Looking at this picture here, Snowflake Obsidian. I have one of these stones, and I thought it was obsidian, but I don't know. Snowflake Obsidian is just really cool. And I just thought that the way you kind of did the strokes on it, it's just a really beautiful artwork. What can you tell me about Snowflake Obsidian? Anything interesting?
Yeah, so obsidian is like the great protector, and it has been used throughout history for scrying. And a snowflake obsidian brings in this like much more ethereal energy to its magic. So snowflake obsidian helps us to pull in from higher and ground it all the way down. Obsidian scrying is to look at a crystal, and sometimes it's sort of like when you look at first of all, when someone says like, "Oh, do you have a crystal ball?" That's scrying.
Okay.
You're looking at your crystal ball and you're seeing what is inside.
People still do that? That's
yeah. I got
you got your crystal ball right over there. Okay.
Yeah. Here, we'll do a little pin. There's all kinds of crystal balls back here
Nice.
That are hanging out, and I do use them for scrying. So snowflake obsidian allows the opportunity for you to look into what you're not seeing, but to have that more sort of crown chakra, spiritual, higher energy come through and really ground for you. It is very, very, very protective, blocks out anything. Obsidian sends back, it's like return to sender energetically. I don't need that. No, thank you. I'm good.
Nice.
Also, traditional obsidian, if you buy like a disc of it or something, a flat piece, if you were to hold it up to the sun, you would see the sun would poke through.
Translucent a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm. And in history, it was used to observe eclipses because you can't look at the sun when it's eclipsing, but you can through an obsidian.
Fascinating. I actually have a cool obsidian sword that I got in Chichen Itza when I was in Mexico. That's another piece that I got. So, I'm a fan of the rocks. And actually, I was telling you about Nathaniel, my boy. He's 5 years old. He loves rocks. And he has like a whole collection. He's like, I want crystals. And it's like, he's got his whole thing, but I don't know anything about the meanings really behind them. So I just I like them from a philosophical perspective, but maybe I should, because now everything you're saying, like, hey, I could tap into that. That's a cool teaching right there.
Yeah,
I love it.
Their whole generation, man. All the kids that are 10 and under, they know. I don't know what they know, but they know.
They're on some wave, right?
Yeah. I mean, I always say, like, they just arrived here from source, so their connection is a lot stronger. They haven't gone through their forgettings yet. So, if you're a parent of a young child out there, please encourage them not to forget the magic. Don't make them fall into your frame of matrix that you think makes sense. Let them be weird. Let them be into whatever weird shit they're into. Don't snuff it out in them, because I promise you that when they're teenagers, they'll hate you for it.
No doubt. But there's the schools and stuff too, right? I feel like we only have so much power, but
that's not true.
Yeah.
You can unindoctrinate your children in school, or out of school, I should say. And if you get your kids to question everything, then they might even teach their teachers, which I know some kids that are like, they straight up go to school and they're like, that's not true. Nope.
No doubt. My boy would be one of those for sure. Can be a bit of a smart ass, but we'll see.
Love it.
Just started kindergarten, so who knows? We'll see how it goes, but I'm glad we had that chat. I did talk about numerology a little bit off the top, and I'm curious to your thoughts on this. I've seen a lot of artists in the space, maybe they love the threes, they do editions of 333, or, even with the follower count. Like, personally, I like 444. I've always been a fan of that. I don't know if that's something to do with Jay-Z a little bit, but I looked into a bit of background history on it, and it's like all about creativity and everything. So I have my own kind of numbers that I like, but where does numerology fall into this conversation? And do you agree that it's kind of been an interesting thing that's popping up around NFTs a lot?
Yeah, I think this is a proof that the collective consciousness is evolving. Everything that we are in this reality is frequency, and the way that we understand frequency is through numbers. Again, I'm going back to the Matrix. It's a blueprint, that movie. It's an opportunity for us to look at how we are created, and the numbers coming down is not an accident. Everything is numbers. Everything is frequency. There was this TikToker who posted a video of using sound wave. He created images. He created 3 separate images, and he layered them on top of each other, and they created a human face. So, like, literally, we are only frequency. We are just sound vibrations showing up from wave to particle back to wave. And while we're particling, we believe that the particle is all that is, but wave is all that is. You're only a particle for a very short while. And the numbers are how the universe speaks to us most often. And so 4 is a very structured number. Think 4 walls, stability, consistency. Like, there's a lot of balance in 4. Right. And we as a species, like, anybody who's ever gone through any kind of awakening, they see 1111, because 1 is the beginning of all. It's the start. It's the onset. And so 1111, you're really doing it. That's as much as you could be doing it. 1111, right? What more can the clock give you than that? Right?
No doubt.
And so I feel like, what we're seeing in Web3, this is where, when I'm talking about that sort of slow evolution that we're on, this is like one of those clear indicators that I'm like, oh, y'all putting out a 3,333 collection. Love to see it.
Yeah.
I'm in, I'll buy.
There
right. So, like, I think it's a really great thing. And I think that, the more that we have understanding about numerology, and that we really put it out there to the world about what's important to understand in our reality. Like I said, we are literally circles, squares, and triangles, and we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's it. And that's why when we teach our children, it's the first thing we teach them. That's the indoctrination. Hey, you're in this reality. This is what we do here.
Yeah. This is your numbers. It's your letters.
That's right. Yeah. And the cows go moo. That's what we do. Right. And so horses say neigh and the pigs say oink. Right. And so like, that's how we start the program, is like, this is what we do in this reality. And we think as adults, I learned my numbers a long time ago. I studied math. Maybe I went as far as high school. Maybe I went all the way to, whatever degree in mathematics, but we forget that everything is literally just super broken down into these numbers. And when you let yourself look and observe the universe looking for the numbers, and you start to be like, okay, I keep seeing 256. What is 256? And you look it up, you'll see that there's like a stability, a balance, a partnership happening with a little bit of chaos and like some exponentialism happening. And you can look at your life and be like, well, where is that partnership and where's the instability? And you start to look at your life so differently. And this is what I teach, is that there is a deeper way of looking at your reality. There's a different way to decode the matrix. There's a different way to reprogram your own mind. And in truth, as we move into this consciousness instead of this consciousness, what's important is to be responsible for what you're responsible for. How do you show up, kind of like a jerk, in a way that thinks, I know it all. I learned my numbers a long time ago. Like, did you?
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
Nice. I like that. And so that's moving from the triangle to the circle for those who couldn't see your hand gestures. But most definitely, that's the evolution. And that circle is a recurring thing. And with Sheila brought it up, I believe, and TP as well. The idea of, really making things cyclical and understanding that everything is a cycle helps, I think, with your perspective on life, really. Now, this has been a very eye-opening conversation, Jana, and I appreciate it. I feel like you probably charge people money for these type of teachings. So I feel lucky, and our guests our listeners should definitely feel lucky as well. Anybody in the live chat, if you have any questions, we're winding down here. This is your time to ask. A couple more questions here, and then I'll be able to let you go, Jana. But I do want to hear, what is kind of next for you? What's around the corner? What can we look forward to? Any projects you're working on that you want to share? Any of your own alpha, as it were?
Sure. So like I said, the Crystal Magic Punks are being turned into an Oracle deck. I'm super stoked about that. It's a slow going process because, like I said, it's all me. I'm the one-man band, but they are coming, and they will be available for purchase. I am working also on a group coaching program where, you'll be able to get access to me every single week in a different kind of context. Right now, my main focus is just on getting back into, helping people as much as I possibly can. I think there's a lot to know about this world, and my main goal in all of my life is to be a public speaker and to be speaking on big stages and out there in as many places, because I think that I offer a unique and interesting perspective. And so that is also part of where my business is sort of building towards. Any other alpha? Oh gosh, I don't know.
You definitely have shared an amazing, unique perspective, and I agree. You would grace any stage. I think this conversation of spirituality on the blockchain and really metaphysics on the blockchain, honestly, is really what the space needs, frankly. More of that kind of like, it's in line with wellness, right? And I think, obviously there are those who have their religious objections to getting real esoteric with it, but others who want to hear about it and want to learn about that history and want to learn about that perspective. So I think it would be an amazing talk for any stage of these Web3 conferences that we're attending and out and about. Do you have any? Oh, sorry, you were going to say?
Well, I was going to say also, for those who are very, very dogmatic, those are sort of my favorite conversations, because these teachings are all the same in every single religion. And it's very easy. I was raised quite religiously, not very, but religiously enough Jewish, and I love to my friends who are like, I'm like, okay, well, do you know that all of our holidays follow the moon, and do you think that that is an accident? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and it goes deep. It's like they knew those religions.
I could see it for sure. Yeah, I think getting too dogmatic is where the problem becomes, I think, but it makes for interesting conversations. So if you welcome that, then power to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I studied religious studies actually at the University of Manitoba here where I'm at, and
Cool.
definitely came away from it with that understanding that, like, as much as I was raised Christian, I believe that's my faith, there are recurring themes throughout these different religions, and, blessings to everybody. Those who come in with good, genuine kind of sentiment. I think doesn't matter what your religious background is. The light, as it were, kind of will impact everybody. And yeah.
Yeah.
Last question. What do you say to the doubters out there? Those who see us in this Web3 space, plugging away and just advocating for the technology, advocating for the Web3 ethos, which is a philosophical social level kind of change that we're kind of advocating for. So it's more than even just the technology. What do you say to those who think we're crazy?
First of all, I love a non-believer, whether they are non-believers in spirituality or non-believers in Web3. I love a good "I told you so." I love an "I told you so" far too much. But it is the curse of me, because I am psychic. I can see, and when people don't believe, I'm like, well, see, I told you so. But I think it's normal. It's natural. We all want to defend the reality that we believe in. And I think non-believers on both counts are defending their reality. They're defending what they believe to be true. And also, in many cases for non-believers, the old system upholds their entire definition of self, whether you define yourself as victim or victor. And the role that you played in that society probably had a big impact on identity, particularly if you were like, a banker, a lawyer, a this, a that, and you don't buy in, like, yeah, because you probably benefited from it, right? And so this is, again, where it's like very important to be nuanced, very important to be aware that we are evolving and we need to keep evolving. And so check your ego, and really look in, because I imagine that there's other places in their reality where they are actively denying the role they play in the slowing of human evolution. And I think we're all responsible for that individually. And I believe that responsibility differs from person to person, but it's on each of us to figure out what it looks like. So if you're a non-believer and you're like, oh, what the hell are you still doing in there? And what are you, blah, 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 blah. Like, I get it. Many of us wouldn't necessarily stay in the abusive relationship of Web3.
I haven't found it abusive personally, but exactly. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, like from the outside, it's easy to be like, oh, that's a terrible relationship. Right. Why are you in that? Right. But, again, you never know until you're in it. And I think that it's very, very important that, those who don't believe, at least go ahead and do things like, subscribe to 30 days of NFT. This technology is coming anyway. Shout out to Zen Academy, by the way, for that. It's a great tool. 30 days of emails in your inbox that teach you all about this. Phenomenal. But yeah, I think learn about what the technology means, because the blockchain is coming, the CBDCs are coming, and you're going to have to know about it. And the more that you put your head in the sand, the more that the bots, be they AI bots or the government ones, same, they'll tell you what to do and you will have no choice. So I feel like if you believe in your freedom, if you believe in your own self-autonomous power as a creator God on this planet, fucking learn about it, man. And if you hate everything about it, whatever, then don't participate in crypto Twitter, but learn. You have to learn,
Can't be bad to learn, right? And I think that there's a lot of good lessons that were going to come from it. And like you say, the evolution is kind of happening either way. So
Inevitable.
you better
Those
be
planets are moving.
yeah, exactly. Just be aware of it, you know. Well, I appreciate everything you've shared today. It's been a really great conversation. I'm definitely, yeah, no, it's been awesome. And I want to join. So it's Metaverse Metaphysics every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, you said, right? So anyone who's enjoyed this conversation, wants to talk more or hear more from Jana, definitely jump into the Metaverse and Metaphysics Twitter Spaces room. Thursday, 9 p.m. You can follow Jana on Twitter at Jana Stern Healing, right? On Twitter. Healer, yes, Jana Stern Healer on Twitter.
They wouldn't. It was too many letters, and I had to change all my handles on all of my socials because it was too many letters on Twitter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's all good.
Well, I look forward to attending your Twitter Spaces, and I definitely want to continue this conversation. And I think it's going to be a recurring theme at some point, so maybe we can get you back on the show and talk spirituality. Yeah, it's been amazing, Jana, and I'm glad we were able to connect in Toronto. And to everybody out there, thanks for joining on the live stream. Until next time, we'll catch you